Hey everybody, Edo here, and for this week's League video, I want to talk about Canada. More specifically, the Game Artisans of Canada, but I'll also be talking about Canada a little bit. And, over the last 3 years as I've been engaged with board gaming and Kickstarter and publishing and all these different facets of the industry, I've really gained and started to have more exposure to all of these different countries and cultures and groups that are in gaming. Again, I think, in the United States in general, but also just wherever your sort of gaming group is, you don't necessarily have that much exposure to people from other countries. You probably have played their games or may have played their games, but not as much direct, interaction. But as I've been going to more cons and being more involved in the industry, I've begun having that interaction. And after I did the 10 US designers you should know about, more and more people were talking about other countries and Canada and Australia and about this or that. I've also started doing these Kickstarter Q&As with people. Fabio was in Canada, Gavin was in Canada, Sebas in Argentina, Vince in Poland, really starting to gain, Alex in France, some understanding and appreciation for all these different countries. And actually, a little secret, because I don't think it's going to be happening anytime soon, I'm super interested in traveling and seeing all of these different places and engaging with the communities and just getting a feel for what gaming means in these different countries or states as well. Let's talk about Canada. So look, if you're a general American, or perhaps from other countries, I don't know, but I think Canada is like hockey, bags of milk, comedians, clean streets, probably, I don't know, French fries with gravy, right? That's sort of what, and I said hockey, that was the first one, right? But those are that's sort of what people think about, Canada, super stereotypical, I apologize, but I mean, that's sort of what it is. And I have been to Canada a few times, but never since I've been into board gaming. Part of the video game industry, was up there for different companies and different events, and had some friends up there, but not too much. A couple times over the years. Very nice people, always very pleasant to be in Canada from my experience. But in sort of looking at and seeing the scene, there's so much going on there, and in particular, I am really impressed and excited about what the Game Artisans of Canada is doing there. I haven't been to an event or anything, but just understanding who they are and thinking about what the League of Game Makers is, which is very different. It's super interesting. First, I think I'll try putting this up on screen. Let's just talk about Canada for one more second. Especially, this is very US-centric. I'm sure in Europe, it's just oh, that's North America. What's the difference? Just market size. But so, if you are on the West Coast, California, Washington, once you hit Canada, that's Vancouver. So when people talk about Vancouver, Vancouver is essentially above Seattle, right? You start moving across, you pass by Calgary and Edmonton. I almost applied and got a job at BioWare in Edmonton, and I was like, wait, this is a little too crazy for me. And then you move across, and then you hit Winnipeg, and there's a lot of other states. Canada's huge. It's huge. But then you hit Winnipeg, which perhaps the only reason you know of it is from Ticket to Ride, honestly. But I'm sure people in Canada know all things about Winnipeg. And then you sort of move through Ontario and then down. And then Toronto's basically near Detroit. And you have Montreal, Quebec City, Ottawa, sort of above New York and Vermont, right? There's a lot more province and states and areas in Canada above those. But really, those are some of the hot spots. In particular, Vancouver and Toronto are pretty big. But so... And hey, if you're Canadian, educate, right? In the comments, links, whatever you want, right? Point me in the right direction. Honestly, I'd like to travel through Canada and see all these places and get some perspective, because my perspective is zero. Maybe a little more than zero, but not much. And I have some notes for this one. There are a wealth of designers in Canada. There's some publishing, especially through Kickstarter. Certainly a lot of Kickstarter backers. Canada's always a big group. But the Game Artisans of Canada is a group that was established in 2008. At least that's what their logo says. But the Game Artisans of Canada is a group where sort of like-minded designers and artists group up to talk about games. And part of their mission is not only to make sort of the current designers better, but really mentor and grow design and art in Canada. Like, it's super, super awesome. League of Game Makers has that vibe a little bit, but it's not as formalized, and it's not really focused specifically on designers. It's really just a group of game makers in the United States that started doing tutorials and articles and having a blog together. But the Game Artisans of Canada is much more of a group. The structure has chapters, and chapters have a chapter steward in different areas. So this may not be exactly, but presumably a Vancouver chapter and a Toronto chapter and a couple other ones. I don't have that list in front of me, but they're different groups, and then they, have meetups and get together. And this is through conversations with different members of Game Artisans of Canada. I haven't experienced any of this. I just pseudo-interviewed, Facebook asked people what it was about, and this is what they told me. So if you're in a group in the Game Artisans of Canada and you're like, Ed, that's nothing, that's not what it's about, I apologize, give me a call and I can do a second part and we can go from there. But basically the groups get together, they do a lot of play testing, looking at prototypes, giving feedback, introducing people to other publishers and designers, and just have group and big meetups. I think these are a little different than just gaming at gaming cafes, right? These are people who really consider themselves artisans, right? People who are crafting fantastic things, whether through design and art, and sharing and mentoring each other. And that's really what is amazing. And it's almost surprising that it hasn't extended down into the States more. I don't know, perhaps in Europe and other countries there's more of that vibe as well. And then every once in a while they meet in sort of a bigger scope or scale, and presumably like we do with the League, at Gen Con, I'm sure they get together, or at other conventions to sort of talk and see what's happening and exchange notes. Let's just talk about just a few of the amazing designers out of Canada. So this is sort of like my designers you should know in the States, though I don't necessarily know these guys and gals quite as much. But you have Sen Fung Lim and Jay Cormier. If you don't know that duo, Belfort, Junk Art, Akrotiri. Akrotiri is amazing, and I like Junk Art. I like Akrotiri Mori, but really fantastic systems. What are they? When I look at the games from those two guys, it oftentimes reminds me of why am I forgetting his name? Scott. Scott Alms. Jeez, Scott Alms, because they're so good at layering in the different mechanics and systems within a game to pull together these parts and have it all feel cohesive. It's a real specialty of them. You have Stephen Sauer with Perlock Holmes. You have Daryl Andrews and Adrian Admescu, who did Sagrada. But Daryl Andrews, if you haven't seen, he is just, every con I run into that guy, it's like he signed 3 more games. Daryl Andrews is going to be as much a household name just in pure volume. But he also just has really good designs. Daryl Andrews, somebody who finds that hook fast and gets it exposed in the game, and you're having fun with it. Like, it just feels neat. It's like novelty and then mechanics, and they get married together. You have Gord Hamilton, who's Santorini, and if you haven't played Santorini, that game's stellar. And then obviously Gavin Brown for Roxley, worked with Gord, he worked with Oren Bishop on Steampunk Rally, he worked with Matt Tolman on Brass, he worked with, he did Super Motherload, Paul works with him in Canada. So these guys and gals, again, have a good connection with each other and are working together, and they're also working with a lot of people in the States for sure. You have Josh Capel, something like that, who was co-designer with Wasabi, D&D Rock Paper Wizards with Sen and Jay, but also amazing artist, and does a lot of games through Kids Table board games. Kids Board Game Table? One of those things. You have, and I'm sorry about some of these names, you have Yves Trigney with Blueprints, Chris Chung with Lanterns, and Chris is just a super sweet guy. It's always nice. He always stops by and says hello. I was good friends with Randy and reviewed Lanterns early on, and really strong designer. You have Roberta Taylor with Octopus Garden, Tim Brown with Quartex, which I believe was published by C, CSG Games, CGS Games. I'm sorry. Some of these, I'm like recalling it as I go, but with Fabio. And then you have a lot of new artisans, like new up-and-coming designers. Erica Hayes, who's worked with Darrell's on Ink Monsters. You have Jesse Wright, who's working with Sen on The Legend of Korra Pro Bending Arena. And who doesn't like The Legend of Korra? I mean, I do. You have Josh Dirksen, who worked on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Adam Wise, who's the head of Mousehold. I just saw that box for the first time, like this week, looking very cool. And then, again, there's certainly a lot of designers, but you also have a lot of artists. You have Josh Kappa, who we mentioned, Gavin Brown, who does the graphic design, the product design. If you haven't seen my Q&A with Gavin, that one's awesome. I really enjoy talking to that guy, and he's a rock star. Josh Dirksen, Stephen Sauer. So just tons and tons of designers and artists working together doing wonderful stuff. So, if you're in Canada and you watch this channel but you're not associated or familiar with the Game Artisans of Canada, I highly recommend you check it out. Game designers in the US, get your act together. Let's group up and do some cool things. I think it's a really neat model that helps mentor and grow designers and artists, as well as clearly build those sort of triangulations between groups. A couple other things just worth mentioning. In Vancouver, you have the Starlight Citadel, which is a game store, and recently this year I think was the first Shut Up and Sit Down convention. Again, these are I didn't go to the con, but I've heard some great things about it. And in Toronto, you have Snakes and Lattes. I think there are 3 of them, which is, from what I've heard, an amazing board game cafe, and all of the above. Right? They do all sorts of things, but they had some, always, shipping in Starlight Citadel, and these are game stores and game spaces that are just amazing, and worth checking out. Again, from a Kickstarter creator perspective, Canada's buying a lot of stuff, a lot of great gamers in Canada. Not the size of the U.S. market or some of the other markets, but who cares about that, right? Gaming's great, and it's great wherever you have it. So I probably am going to put up the games of some of these designers I rattled through, worth checking out. I mean, these are stellar games and really creative and interesting stuff. So, you didn't know anything about Canada? Now you know a little bit about Canada. If you knew a lot about Canada, feel free to make fun of me for not knowing anything about Canada or punching me in the shoulder at a con or something. I apologize. Anyway, I wanted to spend some time here. I'll probably be doing some more deep dives on some specific designers, probably do some more Q&As, but I also want to, I haven't really done anything on Germany or some other countries, and getting more familiar with gaming in different places. I have an interview with William from Mexico, Aether Tower, another growing game space. So much cool stuff going on in gaming right now. So anyway, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.